Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome to another show. Cody, how you doing?
This room is usually a lot colder than it is, and now I'm starting to wonder. Is the heat working better upstairs in my sauna than I thought it was, or I don't really know. Maybe I have no idea. I'm just feeling a lot warmer than I usually do. I'm usually cold up here. I have my sweatshirt to throw it on, but there's going to be no sweatshirt. There's no sweatshirt. Never flustered. No,
okay.
Unflappable, Ben.
What are we talking about today? Basketball?
Yeah, I think there's some aspects of offense that perhaps we'll get into, break down a couple of offensive guys and whatnot. And I am really interested in this overall conversation, because I think something that you and I really get interested in philosophically is just like, what does it actually mean to be a great offensive player, right? And basketball is kind of this fluid sport where there's not one way to do something, but it's like made up of all these like discrete, what do you want to say? Plays where different actions kind of happen. And you can be successful in any number one of those kinds of ways. And there's no real like platonic ideal for how to be like a really good NBA player. And I think that's something that you and I think interest us. And hopefully we're going to be exploring that a little bit coming up here.
Well, you have a lot of ideas to get to today. I can tell from that was a very philosophical prelude. I was just going to start us off with our Wemby watch, which is a defensive. It's starting to slip. Wemby's under 10 points per 100 change in his team's defensive rating when he's on the court versus off the court. The Spurs are still only flirting with the best defense of all time when Wemby plays, and they're about league average when he sits. It's about 9.3 point per 100 change right now on defense when Victor Wembanyama is on the court versus off the court, and he's just behind when we look at those beautiful multi-year samples we talked about in our historical series over the summer. He's just behind the all-time rim and short mid-range protection record holder Dikembe Mutombo in terms of points changed per 100. So that's our Wemby watch for the week.
Well, as I did last week as well, I would like to state that Rudy Gobert is approaching a 13-point per 100 possession swing for the Timberwolves. Now, when he's on the court, their defense is like 108.8 or something like that, which it's definitely not all-time kind of stuff. But let's just say that I think Gobert needs to be getting a lot more credit for a lot of how the Wolves are being successful, because he is still just a defense unto himself, and he has been for like a decade now. I don't know how many guys you can point to and say that is a singular defense on their own, but he is certainly one of them.
That is beautifully Minnesotan of you. Is that the right adjective? Did I get that adjective right? Is that how you describe one from the state of Minnesota?
I think so. I don't know what else it would be. I don't hear a lot of even Gobert love around here. There's a lot of people love Edwards, people love Randall, but a lot of people are like, Gobert, he can't catch the ball, which isn't wrong, but we're ignoring the defense.
I have a bone to pick before we get into your serious philosophical basketball analysis today and whatnot. I think, and we will do our show every year that we do on our sub all-stars, where we'll list the players in the league we think that are basically playing at an all-star level, some gray area, and then the handful of players that are just below that, not quite good enough to be all-stars, but critically important in today's game, top 50 players or so in the first half of the year. We will do that. But this is a bone that I have to pick right now, Cody. Derrick White of the Boston Celtics, apparently getting no all-star love from anyone anywhere, is ridiculous. And it offends me in the year 2026 that we have to sort of explain or defend why someone like Derrick White should both be in the all-star conversation and probably, when I list all the players in the East, probably just flat out be on the all-star team. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but the East is very lean when it comes to star players this year, and I was blown away. I did some surveying of the interwebs and the votes, and the fan starters were just announced this week, and other articles for media members picking their all-stars, and I see Derrick White nowhere to be found, and this is crazy to me. It's crazy.
This is something I used to care a lot. Back when I was high school, there was a lot of voting for all-stars online and whatnot, and I remember quite a few times I was voting quite a bit. I think for some reason I just have a lot of memories of voting for Andre Iguodala, like around 2008-ish. I was like, look at this guy's two-way. He's filling up the stat sheet. This guy's incredible. I know he's
Sounds
not like
familiar.
a great number one option, but this guy
He's a great
rocks.
defender and not a great number one option. And he does all this other stuff, and he passes really well, and he does sneaky things that, who's that sound like?
And guess what? He ends up on one of the greatest, possibly the greatest team of all time, probably the greatest team. Was the full Eastern Conference roster revealed, or is it just
the starters?
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you saying you think White should have been a starter, or you just think there needs to be more conversation about him?
I don't think I haven't seen anyone talk about him for All-Star. Yeah.
Okay. I'm interested. I know one name that I've heard floating around a few different podcasts is Norman Powell.
That's a great example. If you're good, first of all, I would vote for Derrick White over Norman Powell in a sneeze right now. But if you're going to bring up Norman Powell, how are you seriously not having that internal battle of like what argument do I need to make for Norman Powell over Derrick White? And you're right. These are things I usually don't care about because a lot of people come at it from the standpoint of like an argument to be made. Like this guy put up X number of stats compared to his normal stats and did it at this percentage. And his team was 11 games over 500. And he did it while this other player was injured. I don't know what accent I've delved into here. It's terrible. But I'm just saying like, we never think about it from an argument standpoint. So it is a silly exercise. Maybe you don't want to go here with me today. It's okay.
Well, what do you think it is about Derrick White that makes it so he's not part of this conversation quite as much? Like, do you think it is as simple as like he's not averaging 20 points per game? Like, is that literally it in your opinion?
I think that's one half of the equation, along with whatever scoring numbers, his percentages aren't that high in terms of efficiency. And then the other half of the conversation is what makes him so good. He is a little thing king. He does a million zillion things that people don't notice: tipping balls, spacing, communicating. He's the king of stealing rebounds. So you have these plays that occasionally show up in the box score technically, but the way we think about them as a basketball culture, we don't differentiate between one rebound that everyone else on the team would have grabbed and it meant nothing versus like the most incredible rebound that no one else will get that made a 5-point swing in a play because it stopped a fast break and got a steal and a layup. And Derrick White, that's his whole game. That's his entire game. The Celtics scored 52 points in the second quarter against the Atlanta Hawks the other night. It was a ridiculous show. I think Derrick White had like 2 points and 2 assists. I don't know what his stat line was, but he was not part of the flame throwing. And I felt like he dominated the entire quarter, just making plays left and right on offense and defense, blocking shots, insane touch passes, extra passes, rebounds, just stuff like that, Cody. That's all I'm saying.
That sounds like it could be a pretty interesting video if you were to choose to deep dive that. But like you said about the rebound, it's actually interesting. We get so close, Ben. I feel like we get so close on so many different conversations. And then we just kind of forget a bunch of stuff that we talked about. Like I think about the Russell Westbrook discourse, like the triple-double multiple years in a row. And everyone's like, well, actually, he's stealing a bunch of rebounds. Steven Adams is boxing out. And then people are like, actually, he's pushing transition on all of those. Like, that's the reason for Westbrook getting the rebounds.
All right. You went to your go-to accent there, and then you debuted a new accent, and I just keep going. I think
that was nerd accent. I don't know. I think those are two sides of the nerd conversation. But my point is we approached this interesting conversation about the value of the kinds of rebounds that people grab. And that when you're grabbing a bunch of rebounds that are just uncontested, and it's not as simple as just uncontested versus contested, right? It's like the way that you pick and choose, like you've talked about before, the way that teams are crashing more specifically now, like how you crash, when you crash, can you recover after your crash, things like that. So rebounding is still, like I just said, we approached an interesting conversation about it. And then we just kind of backtracked and like, he's a 2010 guy. Guess he's an all-star. So I think that's the frustrating thing about guys like Derrick White.
If we were to have a Hustle Award winner in the NBA, and we were to give that out, I'm not saying we have that on the Thinkies this year or something. It's a miscellaneous category. It's on offense, defense, rebounding, loose balls, everything. But if we were to give that out, 1, who would you give that to? And 2, why wouldn't it be Derrick White?
I mean, Derrick White's up there. The name that comes to mind immediately is Javonte Green.
You've really been hitting the Pistons.
That dude rocks. Here's the thing: the best way to like judge that kind of a category is when I'm watching a game. How often is a guy just like pushing themselves into my screen and not being one that's like running an offense? And Javonte Green is constantly just like sneaking up on dudes and diving out of bounds and crashing the glass and hounding people. I'm not saying he's better than Derrick White. Like I haven't thought about that too much, but I think he's he's my dark horse pick for this.
Javonte Green is.
Yeah.
That's a solid dark horse pick. I'll give you that. But I just think the point here is that concept, that category, is something that doesn't get measured a lot in data. But when you start to add that into really high IQ players, really good defensive players, that's what White is. He's a really good defensive player, really high IQ, insane motor, insanely unique sort of interstitial loose ball, extra connective tissue skills all over the court on both ends. I don't know. We can move on if you want.
Somebody in our comments just said, "Who's the GOAT little thing king?"
Yeah.
That would be a great study to do. But I think what's interesting is, tell me if you think I'm wrong. I feel like in the modern NBA, the way that it's spaced out, and it seems like there's more moments for chaos, right? Maybe it's easier to stand out as a little thing king. Like, you can go back to the 90s and obviously get somebody like Dennis Rodman is constantly down there being a hustle guy. But when you have like the illegal defense rules and you kind of have this slow down post up sort of offense, I don't know. I feel like I would skew towards more modern players for that particular question, because there's more of those like random moments to appear where somebody could stand out as doing a bunch of little, like Kyle Lowry. You did a video on Kyle Lowry, I think in 2019, as somebody that stands out for that. But I just feel like it's more of a modern thing to be that way.
I agree with that. Although if we're talking about really good players from prior eras that kind of have that, Larry Bird is the guy who I actually think throws people a lot, because they go back and they look at his game and they say, well, he didn't do this with the ball handling and he had this shooting and, he's weak defensively with his feet. And it's like, yeah, but look at all the other crazy little things that are happening with where he puts his body, how he bangs into people, boxing out, tipping balls, touch passes, screen angles. There's a never ending sort of list of things like that. And then you get into the other categories that are harder to judge from the outside, but you get into sort of communication, leadership, coaching, what's it like to be your teammate, stuff like that. I think all these things move the needle a little bit in a way that when you just reduce the game to, hey, somebody scored 24 points a game on this team, I think that's the disconnect.
Well, apparently we're just going to go full Celtics love right now. You start with Derrick White here. You said Larry Bird.
Sorry.
But Larry Bird's teammate, I was just going to add to it. That's why we have a beautiful cake, and I'm just going to put more Celtics
Dennis Johnson time.
Dennis Johnson jumps up there for me. But also, like, if we're talking all of the communication, the leadership, somebody that's thinking through all of those aspects, Bill Russell has to be like absolutely in contention for all of the little things that he ends up doing. So there's 4 Celtics for you in case that's what you were showing up here for today.
Well, you mentioned Derrick White being a good video. Maybe we'll get to that. The one we did this week was one of these new concepts we're doing where we just deep dive a single game, like a super deep dive, to try to understand a lot of the stuff we just talked about. Like, how do you interact with your teammates? How do you communicate? What are all these little subtle things happening from play to play? And the video this week we did was on LaMelo Ball, who we've discussed as being quite a confusing player. I have not heard your reaction, Cody, to this video. And I think today I want to have we had the Paolo conversation. I think the next conversation I would like to have with you is about LaMelo. I have some clarity on him. He's a very weird, interesting player. But I want to pass it to you. You're making a very interesting face right now. Go ahead.
It's tough for you to kick this to me right now, because I don't know what entry point I want to take in the enigma that is LaMelo Ball. And I think the only way to start is by calling him an enigma. Like, he's just a very strange player to watch play basketball. Like, not even the decision making, but just like the way he shoots is very strange. Like, he has normal looking jump shots, but sometimes there's kind of like a one-legged step back thing. Sometimes his feet are kind of kicking out a little bit more. Like, there's a flair to him that you don't really see in a lot of NBA players right now. Like, almost inspired by like an and one sort of thing, where he just has a little bit more sauce in that way. So I think that's almost the starting point for me with LaMelo, is he just doesn't play like a cookie cutter point guard by any stretch of the imagination. And yet at the end of the day, he is magnificently talented. And I think that's where I want to start. with the comparison point with Paolo is both of these guys are incredibly talented. And I think at the end of the day, LaMelo is a lot more talented than Banchero, right? LaMelo is a genius level passer. And when he can catch fire, I mean, we're talking just a deadly 3-point shooter. So I'm going to stop there and see what you have to say to that.
I think that's a great entry point, actually, because with LaMelo, the place that I go when I try to corral what does all that mean? What is he's shooting fadeaways off one leg? He's taken the game we looked at the other day. He took 20 shots in that game, Cody.
Okay.
17 of them were 3-pointers. He took 20 shots and 17 of them were 3-pointers. And it was against a Laker defense that is not been great lately and not really known for having quick point of attack defenders that can contain the ball. So the ball, every time LaMelo comes up and we start talking about the ball, I get so thrown off. I'm literally like making this video and having to re-record my, ball passes the ball there. So I'm just going to call him LaMelo for the entire show, or Melo. So the thing with him is, and you nailed it, you have a very, very fascinating, potentially high-end swing skill in the shooting, high volume shooting, quick release shooting, really wild hand-eye coordination stuff where you see it when he's taking these fadeaway threes falling out of bounds and just draining them. He has hit probably the most wild variety of fadeaway falling out of bounds threes of anyone ever, maybe. And he's only played a handful of, he has 6. He's had 2 this year. He had 1 a couple years ago. He had 1. He's these spinning, falling out of the corner of the gym, arc it over the backboard threes. It's kind of crazy. So that's one skill, but the bigger skill is that team-oriented idea of driving really good offense at the basket, and some of his playmaking stuff, manipulating the ball, his reads, how he passes it, is legitimately high level, really, really high level NBA savant stuff. And I think that drives a lot of positivity. And then what makes LaMelo an enigma is that the question is then not, well, how much does he give back? The question is, how do you triangulate between the good, the bad, and the weird? Because what does it mean if he were to be put in a situation where he's the second or third best offensive player, if he's next to another good ball dominant player, if he's asked to play on a team where he has to defend for 36 minutes a night at a championship level? And as far as I can tell, we have no clue what the answers to those would be, but he's also never been in those situations in his life. And so my head starts to hurt, man, because it's not just well, he's good at this and he's weak here. There's also this third element that you have to figure out. How does it all fit together?
So actually right now, I think he's on a burgeoning offense. He has 2 teammates next to him that are very interesting offensively in Con Knippel and Brandon Miller. And I don't know if this is exactly the reason for some of this, but right now what's happening this season is he's actually taking his lowest rim field goal attempts per 100 possessions, the lowest of his career. He had a couple of seasons where he was 7.5 attempts per 100 at the rim. His lowest before that was 5.5. This season, it's down to 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a big part of having to share the ball more, and there's just less way to do that. He's also scoring at the rim more efficiently than ever. He's at 62% at the rim versus a previous career high 57%. So it's not like we're talking about somebody who's been a good driving scorer in his career. But the thing that's weird about all that is he actually drives quite a bit. If you look at how many actual drives where he puts the ball on the deck and breaks the 3-point barrier, he's 95th percentile in the league, right? I mean, this is still a 3-year low for him in terms of his drives. And again, I think that has to do because he's sharing the ball more with Knippel and Miller, right? And so this is really strange because when I was watching him and I was deep diving some of the numbers, tell me if you think I'm really off base, but I was the profile's a little Halliburton-y, right? It's a little Halliburton-y where there's some high level passing. There's a lot of 3-point shooting. There's this, not always loving to get all the way to the basket and finish strong there. But there's something a little bit less reliable about Halliburton, right? Where Halliburton seems to really thrive on making the right play, where LaMelo sometimes gets lost in his own sauce. And I think that's the triangulation that you're talking about there that's really hard, is sometimes the discernment where it's oh, wait a second, why is this happening? Why are you taking the 4th straight step back 3 instead of making this sort of easy pass? So that's where I wanted to start talking about with that comparison, I guess.
Well, I don't think his ball dominance has changed too much. Mm-hmm. I think his time of possession is right where it's been the last couple of years. It's about 42% on our board for subscribers, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball if you're interested in that. And so that means a little less than half the time Charlotte has the ball on offense, LaMelo is the one possessing the ball. With the balls again. I think what you're getting at with the drives is really fascinating. And I brought it up in this game that we analyzed. Basically, I would like to see him use these skills to set up easier opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about the step back, my first thought was like, I wonder if the cameras track his step backs as a drive because he gets so deep in the lane and then then he'll step back 10 feet. He'll be like, I'm beyond the free throw line. I need to step back 12 feet to take a fadeaway three against this guy. And in isolation, that shot can be okay, right? I actually think statistically he does very well on that shot when he creates a lot of space like that. It's part of the weirdness. It's like, why is a running backwards fadeaway three on one leg seem to be a decent shot for LaMelo Ball? But I would love it to do another thing, like use it to set up another move, throw combinations. He is extraordinary at manipulating defenders with his passes. I would like to see his passes help his scoring now. Right? Let's move defenders out of the way with a ball fake and think score first versus pass first. So you're getting really good stuff. For instance, when we look at his impact on his teammates' rim finishing and true shooting percentage, it's really good. He helps his teammates get better shots and he helps his teammates get easier shots. But it's not if we tried to put him, Cody, where does he rank among the best offensive players, or even just where does he rank among the best pick and roll ball dominant type of players in the league? It's not quite up at the level of the best players, I think, because these other things are missing from what is a pretty good impactful package and attack right now.
I think something that I'm just kind of thinking about this right now in terms of him is, we'll throw around terms like basketball IQ quite a bit to describe like a player going out there. And we talked about Paolo a little bit last episode where they're running that one after timeout play. He forgets the play, basically. He doesn't know what they're running. And then you can see Bane, I think, in the video you're talking about. It's like, hey, go to the corner, go do this, set yourself up that way.
Spoilers, Cody. Spoilers for the video. Come on.
It's more like a trailer, actually. This is like the trailer. I'm trying to get
That's true. That is true. That is the trailer. Yeah.
I'm getting butts in the seats right now, right? That's what I'm trying to do. I'm pre-selling a year in advance, like I'm Christopher Nolan. But I don't get that same sense with LaMelo Ball. Like, I think his understanding of the game, his court awareness and things like that is much higher than Paolo's. But they're just, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. And that's why I say he's an enigma. It's just like the concept of having the ball and being able to do whatever he wants and to be able to shoot from limitless range just makes him drunk with power. And it's just, he's just too excited about it. It's like, I'm going to do this right now. It might look spectacular and work out, but sometimes it's like, you just need to slow down, dude. Just calm down, make a simpler pass, try and back up, try and throw in another move and see if you can get by the defender and set somebody else up. So I think that's the aspect of it is I think his court awareness is great. His willingness to pass is great, but there's something, Ben, and I can't identify it with him.
Man. I think one of the commenters may have said this. He's like the drunken master of basketball. If you're familiar with the drunken master fighting style, there is a little bit of overlap there. Yeah, I mean, his brother Lonzo is a great defender, and his brother Lonzo feels like he has a little bit more of that dog in him, where LaMelo, definitely one of the big question marks is like, all right, how serious can it get if it gets serious? Because part of this is that athletically, he when you talk about his feel and his mental approach to the game and sort of these gifts that he has, a lot of it is court mapping, playmaking. I'm out on the street. I know I can dime somebody up and do something really sexy. And it's great that that's in a 5-man concept, not just one-on-one. That's great. But the flip side is athletically, he's giving something back, whether it's that rim finishing we're talking about, getting downhill, or defensively, he's giving something back by sort of just, there are these plays where it just flounders around the court. And his defense has been better this year. He's a big body and he's quick and he can anticipate. But I think those are the bigger questions for me. And so when you look at Charlotte, you talk about what's brewing in Charlotte and how he plugs into something more competitive. Charlotte's trying to get into, playoff contention, that kind of thing. In the last month, Cody, would you like to guess the Charlotte Hornets offensive rating in the last month.
Overall, when LaMelo,
The whole team, just the team.
Wow.
I'm talking about the Hornets, man. Things are happening with the Hornets.
Well, here's the thing. They dropped 150 in regulation against the Jazz. By the way, that is a wild first quarter to watch. I don't know if I've ever seen a team just give up like that. Like you're down like 30-5 and you're just like, okay, can we just go home, everyone?
That's not what they did to the Nuggets. That's like a replay of the Nuggets game.
So there's that. They dropped 135 in the Lakers. Man, I guess I got to go high. I'm going to guess like 123 for an offensive rating. What'd you have for breakfast today, Cody? Let's take a breakfast detour. This is a school day. It's a granola bar. I have no name brand drops right now, but it's one of these thick puppies, Ben. That keeps me going till lunchtime.
If you work at a granola bar company and you want to sponsor this podcast, then absolutely reach out to us and we will get that going. Cody, it's 125.
Hey,
their offensive rating in the last month is 125. Charlotte is 7-8 with a +7 net differential. 7-8 with a +7 net differential. Now, the reason I bring that up is to say, yeah, everything you said about Con Knippel and Brandon Miller, and these guys are getting better. This team has something to it. It has some punch to it, right? And then you watch them play, and there are times when LaMelo is playing very well, and he's part of this machine, and it's working. And there are other times where LaMelo hits 6 threes in a row, and then the rest of the game, he's like, could I take 25 threes in this game? He finishes like 9 of 20 from downtown. You're like, Melo, I don't know if we needed another 14 threes in that third quarter. He just passes the ball to a big man, runs out and says, pass it right back to me. I'm going to shoot a fadeaway 3. And when you look at LaMelo Ball, his offensive rating on the court during this stretch is 117 because he's missed some of these games and Charlotte has been competitive without him. So, that's a small sample, by the way. That's not really super indicative. It's just to say that as things get better and better in Charlotte, I think LaMelo clearly has this value and I think he clearly has these skills that are good. But man, he just continues to be baffling of like, where would you line him up if we did that? Can we actually, let's take a pause, let's take a second, and then we'll get serious.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to that question in a second because I want to bring up one more thing with LaMelo, right? And I think the thing, I almost had a bias because I thought he was going to score higher on this, but I was watching him more. I was really zoning in, focusing on the LaMelo experience. Like, I feel he's not getting a lot of movement points. Like, I imagined him being this guy that kind of came off screens more, cut around the basket and stuff. And he does move. He doesn't stand in the corner, but he really doesn't generate a lot with his gravity through some of that movement. And Basketball Index, site that has a bunch of different stats and whatever else, they have a stat called movement points per 75. Right. And without really getting into the weeds here, I just lined up all of the top 8 Charlotte Hornets in terms of minutes that they've played this season. LaMelo is 7th of those 8 players in terms of movement points per 75. And that's basically off ball screens, off cuts and things like that. And I think you see that. You really don't see, especially for somebody that's 6'7" or something like that. He's not cutting to the basket to finish lobs. He's not cutting to the basket to finish these kinds of dunks like the LeBron kind of thing. And I think a big part of it is we talked about core strength in a post show before. He's just not a particularly strong guy. Like the way that you almost watch him moving around the court is he's like a paper bag, like a plastic bag blowing in the wind. So if he were to go in there and the defender kind of hits him, he's thrown off course and he can't really course correct for a strong finish down there. So I think that's one thing that actually changed since what I used to think about LaMelo. I'm like, this is not a guy that's generating a lot of offense off of his movement, especially when he's surrounded by other good offensive players.
Was that an American Beauty reference?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
That's great.
That was the image I had in my head. Or even the Family Guy parody of American Beauty. But at that point, it's just, it's a mirrors, Ben. Mirrors all over the place. Facades. What is reality sort of thing.
So let's do it. I know you wanted to do it. You set us up in the introduction. If you had to take LaMelo Ball and you had to, what's going on? You're shaking your head. What's going on?
It's trying to place LaMelo in any kind of vertical placement of offense is folly. It's folly, but we're going to try and do this, Ben. We're going to try and do it.
Well, I think in the past we've talked about, right around this time of year, I think we've talked about like who are the best offensive players in the NBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound familiar?
It does sound familiar. We've done that a couple times, I think.
Okay. And I said I'm done with that. Okay. Yeah. I can't do that. Can't do that anymore. No more. That's out with the trash bag in the wind. Okay. But the thing that I'm gravitating toward is more like who would I want in X situation? Who would I want with Y teammates?
Yep.
Right. Who would I want in this kind of offense, or if I need to run this kind of offense around this kind of sort of roster? That's the way I've been thinking more about these things. So instead of just saying there's this singular idea of a best offensive player, it's breaking it up into these different components of offensive situations. Is that fair?
Do you think a singular player then, depending on the situation, do you think the best offensive players will play a little bit differently depending on the team build that's around them?
Boy, that's a deep question, because we've just seen so many examples recently. Memphis, Miami, Eric Spoelstra, the Wheel, the San Antonio Spurs, Greg Popovich. I'm sure I'm missing a handful in between, where the coach comes in and the coach is the one to reimagine how the team plays, right? The coach is the one to go, what if I use this player slightly differently? And I actually think this is where the thought experiment probably started for me, Cody, where I was like, okay, some players you only run pick and roll. But some players you can run pick and roll in isolation.
Yep.
Some players you can run pick and roll isolation post up. Some players you can run pick and roll isolation post up, elbow, handoff. Like, you see what I'm getting at?
Yes.
So on one hand, a player can be in a situation for years, for like a whole decade, where you see the way they play and you go, well, that's how Steph Curry plays, right? Steph Curry, you run him around the screens. That's how Steph Curry plays. But it takes a coach sometimes to come in and change the gears or the levers a little bit and show us, hey, this player can do all these other things. You've seen the flashes, but they can plug in. Tony Parker can plug into the beautiful game Spurs in this fashion. Tim Duncan's offense got scaled way down, so maybe that's a poor example. But what I'm getting at is, I think part of the value is a player who can play another way, basically. A player who gives a coach that option.
You brought up Tim Duncan there and said that maybe he doesn't count because he scaled down his offense. I think that in itself is a pretty incredible skill. I think a big part of what we talked about with, let's say we go back to we love referencing it. You all should just go back and listen to it so we can stop referencing it. But our 25 of the century series, what we talked about with Giannis is it didn't really matter who was on the court with him. If he was alone, surrounded by role players, surrounded by Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, it didn't matter. Eric Bledsoe, he was basically 31 plus 6 or something. Like, no matter what, he was just averaging the same amount of thing.
With the same footprint all over the court.
Yes.
That's what's incredible. Yeah.
And I think that's the aspect of Tim Duncan that you're talking about. It's like, oh, he scaled down his offense. It's like, yeah, but it's actually great that he was able to scale down his offense, because you can still, I don't think everyone can do that and still provide a lot of value. So I don't know if that's particularly relevant, but I wanted to jump on that point.
I was just correcting myself with Duncan in the sense that I think what you're saying is you want to scale down your offense and still retain a ton of value. And he had already kind of scaled down his offense because he was older and losing value, and you weren't going to run a ton of post offense inside out through Tim Duncan at that point in time. That's where the Spurs were moving away from anyway. Yes. Right. So, okay.
And then on the other side of the coin, you have somebody like Klay Thompson, who at his peak, right? Like, you can plug and play him in a bunch of things. He has a bunch of movement scoring, great at movement scoring, playing a bunch of motion offense sets. But if you surrounded him by a bunch of role players and you're like, hey, let's see how this is going to go, I think you lose some value there. Like, he's not a guy that's going to move the needle as much, because you can't plug him into a bunch of these scenarios. Like, yeah, he's got the movement, but if he needs to pick up the slack, if the team wants to run more pick and rolls or isolations or post ups or things, he's not really going to add a ton of value there. So it kind of goes both ways in that question.
Okay, so the question we landed on today was, where does LaMelo Ball fall in this sort of, well, originally it was primacy, pick and roll, isolation players, and we had a very small disagreement before we recorded about what this definition actually is. So I'm going to pass it to you, and I'm going to let you frame how you would like to ask this question that we're going to answer.
Well, okay, so you can kick it to me, and we did have this disagreement that maybe we'll work out here live in front of
That's really
everyone that was
fun.
to watch.
No one's watching, just only like 10 people, and they all support us.
But the way, hey man, this is year however many of podcasting. This will be one of the first times we just showed up and we're like, not 100% sure we're on the same page for the question.
This is
But
like a marriage at this point.
here's how I imagined the question. So I was thinking, like, all right, you have an offense, you want to run a bunch of pick and rolls, and you're trying to figure out which players in the league would be best to just run a 50, 60 possessions of pick and roll slash isolations throughout an entire game. Which of these players are going to have the most impact in that sort of role? That's the way that I came to this conversation when I was thinking about LaMelo Ball.
Yeah, and I think that's very similar to the way I was thinking about it as well, except the subtle difference was I was thinking, this is subtle, but it's important. I was thinking, I don't have anyone else on my team who I can really drive offense through. So I have a bunch of role players. So who would I want who can have some sort of offensive primacy next to those role players? And that also means I could use them in other ways. But I think where I don't want to trip you up and where we had a small, subtle sort of framing here is that you're concerned that if we open that door, then all of a sudden you can just spam Nikola Jokic elbow handoffs or something, and you're moving too far away from the spirit of just pick and roll or just isolation.
Yeah, that's actually exactly it. Because I think the Jokic of it all, Ben, is that you can insert him in this conversation and say he'd be the best offensive player surrounded by role players, but you're moving away from the spirit of like, oh, he's not going to do it through a bunch of pick and rolls. Maybe he's through some isolations and post ups and stuff, but he'll still be able to generate some offense with elbow actions and movement. It doesn't even matter who is surrounding him.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to map my thoughts onto the way you're framing the question. It's certainly a much simpler way to attack the question. So have at it. Where would you even begin? Do you want to tell me who you think are like clear-cut better players in that situation when you're gonna run pick and roll ISO as the primary guy? We're agreeing here. This is a situation where you tell me actually. Do you have just role players next to you, or are you running pick and roll primary and you have like another star or two stars, or how are you thinking about it?
So I think that's a good question. I think here's the way maybe we can do it. Maybe we can both tackle the ways that we philosophically thought about it and see like what sorts of answers we come up with.
I just want to point out, this is why at this point in time, when people are like, who are the best offensive players? I'm like, this is so complicated. There's so many things under the hood that I would like to address before answering that. So continue.
So I'm thinking like 3-and-D role player-y type things. You basically need to rely on this player going to a bunch of pick and rolls to generate offense. So like the first names I threw down in really like kind of sort of maybe-ish an order that I'm not sold on. Like I landed on guys like Luka, Shea, Cade, Brunson, Harden, Jamal Murray. Like those are some of the guys that immediately jump to mind as being like, if I'm going to run a ton of pick and rolls, they can set up the shooters. Maybe some of them, like Shea, for instance, is probably a weaker passer compared to guys like you'd see from Luka or Cade. But in terms of like outright scoring off those possessions, coming off a screen, you got a little bit of space. He's basically unmatched in the NBA. So that was almost the push and pull that I was running into. It's like, how do I balance somebody like, let's say Cade, for instance, who's genius level passer, setting guys up, throwing lob dunks to Jalen Duren, spraying it out to shooters like Duncan Robinson and things like that. But in terms of the scoring, like from him, he's usually right around neutral, if not a negative scorer. Whereas Shea, not going to bring the same passing punch, but scoring wise, you basically have to go back to Michael Jordan to find somebody that's going to be scoring at that level of volume and efficiency in those sorts of possessions. So I struggled almost to triangulate that in itself when I was thinking about pick and rolls and ISO.
You said to me that you did not want data before we recorded this show.
I did say that. Yeah.
Yes. You have your own data, you have the vibes, but I have extra data. I said, Cody, would you like to know who, when they run pick and rolls, among the players in the league that run a lot of pick and rolls, there's something like 55 players in the league that have run 500 pick and rolls. Would you like to know who the most efficient pick and roll player is in the league?
Does this count both them scoring and
exactly.
off of them passing?
Exactly. Yes.
Can I throw a curveball? for who I think it might be?
Okay, well, I'm asking you because you didn't want to know beforehand, and I think it's a really interesting data point in this conversation. So,
It's a very interesting data.
Yes, who do you think might be number one?
I'm just going to go on a crazy limb here. Is it Jamal Murray this season?
Jamal Murray is fifth.
Okay.
Jamal Murray is fifth. I will give you one more hint if you want to take a stab at it with the audience. It's not from the 5 players you mentioned so far.
Oh, none of those guys.
No.
Oh, that's really fascinating. Wow. That really throws me for a curveball.
Okay.
My second guess would have been Luka. Let me, you know what? I'm out. Tell me.
Well, we've mentioned him in this podcast, and it's part of the fascination that I had with thinking about how to frame this question. Stephen Curry.
It is Steph Curry.
Stephen Curry, his team's offensive rating and his pick and rolls is 116. Mm-hmm. Austin Reeves is second at 113. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is third at 112. Those are the 3 leaders according to the fancy tracking that we have in pick and roll efficiency. Now, if you're the first time you're hearing stats like this, very important to remember that your teammates matter, the team you play on matters. But of course, in this case, Stephen Curry doesn't play on a great offense. So it's kind of some magic sprinkles going on there. And this has been something that has happened consistently throughout his career, where he has been not just an elite off-ball player, but an elite pick and roll player. He's, to your point, he's not a great passer. He's a good enough passer, right? But he's not a great passer. But the absurdity of his pull-up shooting and what it does, and that's a key word there, the pull-up shooting. It's not just movement shooting and catch and shoot situations away from the ball. It's the pull-up shooting. And how crazy that warpage is on the court leads to a lot of traps where then he creates a 4-on-3 for his team. So I assume we're like, that's kosher for the way you're thinking about this. Those types of plays with Stephen Curry, spam a lot of pick and roll, they trap him, and you get a 4-on-3.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's really interesting because it kind of talked about, you know, there's multiple ways to skin a cat here, Ben, on offense, and you can't reduce it to just being like, oh, he's a better passer, he's more efficient, blah blah blah. Because Steph Curry just breaks the game, and all of these players, I should say, come at these particular skills in really interesting and different ways. And the particular brand of Steph Curry breaking like the pick and roll, and, you know, not even to mention the off-ball stuff, just opens up easier passing angles. Like, he doesn't have to be a Luka or Bird level passer to make some of these easier reads, like the Draymond Green power play 4-on-3 sorts of things. That's not happening because he's the best passer of all time. It's happening because players are terrified of him being anywhere open within 30 feet of the basket. So it's interesting to think about that, because you can't use that heuristic for everybody. But for him, it's an enormous factor for how good of a pick and roll player he is.
Yes. And then there's the question of how much credit do you give someone like Draymond Green for being a short roll passer? See, this is where it's almost impossible to find a basketball stat that isn't dependent on someone else.
Yes.
Your teammates, a specific teammate, the coach, what the coach wants to do, the way the defense covers you, right? That's another huge one. It's one of my favorites, and hoping to do a video on that concept at some point this season. So, okay. So Steph Curry's number one. I said Austin Reeves is number two. I think Austin Reeves is great in pick and roll, by the way. Like, he's very skilled in pick and roll. To your point, balancing the scoring and the passing is interesting, because LaMelo is really good in a lot of the passing areas, but he's not great in some of the scoring areas. Whereas a similar player that's a little different would be Tyrese Maxey. Not great in the passing areas, but better in the scoring areas, right? And Maxey gets that trap treatment that we talked about with Curry too. Man, I mean, there are games I turn on the Philly game and I don't watch the first half, and I turn it on in the second half, and I'm like, oh, so Maxey has 30, but they now are trapping him every time. They've had enough of him scoring for the rest of the game. By the way, Maxey's pick and roll efficiency on that Philadelphia offense, not great. He's 25th in the league, if you were thinking about contextualizing him versus some of these players. So a couple more I want to get to statistically, but I thought I would throw that out there for you to react to.
First of all, in terms of the comments here, yes, I just used the phrase more than one way to skin a cat. And I expressed an issue with it because I just thought it was particularly violent. And I'm like, is there another way to say it? And this is the issue. I just fall back on it. It's not like I finished the episode that one time and called PETA, right? Like I was just like, I don't know, maybe there's another way. And here I am just falling back on the cultural context in which I exist, just like these NBA players. But something that you said, it is all about pressure. And how are these players exerting pressure on a defense? You just brought up Tyrese Maxey. He's exerting pressure through his blinding speed, and the fact that if you're not on him and ready to shift really quickly with your hips, he's going to blow by you, right? Whereas Steph Curry doesn't have to do this. Just by nature of having any kind of space, he is exerting a ton of pressure in that way. Whereas LaMelo Ball, A, he doesn't have the blinding speed to get to the basket like Maxey. B, he doesn't have the continual dribble moves of Shea where he can just kind of hit you with a combo and get to wherever he wants. C, he doesn't have the knockdown 3-point shooting that Steph Curry does unless you watch him in like the right 5-minute span. So like the pressure is just kind of like, yeah, you're talented and can catch fire, but consistently, I don't know where he would draw a defense where he's going to be a particularly dangerous pick and roll runner.
A lot of great points there. Peyton Pritchard is 8th in pick and roll efficiency right now. Again, just among these high volume pick and roll players. And that would be another great example of just existing in the cultural context that surrounds him, to paraphrase your poetry a second ago, because as good as Peyton Pritchard has been about his decision making, keeping his turnovers down, that's another element here, right? So whether you're committing a turnover when you try to score or pass, that's going to be baked into your efficiency. And that even doesn't even get picked up here because that can damage your defense on the other end if you have really bad turnovers. So Peyton Pritchard, very economical player in this situation, but he's running those pick and rolls within the context of the Boston offense that we discussed recently on YouTube, right? And so how much is that influencing sort of your overall offensive numbers that we're looking at here? Jaylen Brown is 10th. I personally wouldn't put Jaylen Brown in this top group running pick and roll, but this is where it gets interesting, Cody, because if we're talking about isolation, and you mentioned Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jaylen Brown right now is kind of similar to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. His mid-range is from another planet. He's attacking the basket like mad. His free throws have gone way up. And then like Shai, although I think Shai is better as a passer and a pick and roll operator, and he's improved this year even more, you can run a little bit of this offense off of screens with Jaylen Brown and get him downhill or get him to his spots in the mid-range as well. So the combination of saying we just need a player for on-ball primacy, it can be done in different ways. I think that makes this list more complicated. I mean, even someone like Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic can be a beast in isolation. He can take dudes down in the post and give them trouble in the post as well. So you get all the pick and roll operation with the passing and the scoring. You get isolation scoring if you get a cross match or a mismatch. And if you get a smaller player, he's going to try to do that slow drive thing, get you into the paint, get you into the post, turn his back, score, draw fouls. He's going to be up there in the grifting ratings this year, man. He's drawing fouls like crazy.
Oh my God. Luka, his favorite move this season is getting somewhere in the paint and then just hitting him with the Jimmy Butler pump fakes. Just like, you're going to jump at something, just do it now. Like, it's going to happen. And then he just draws the foul that way. It feels like, you talk about the context too, Luka felt like a better pick and roll operator with Dallas when he was with them. And the context of that team of I don't know if you agree with that, but having somebody like Derek Lively or Gafford or any of these like 3-and-D guys that's surrounding him was just a better situation to open up some of these passing angles that I don't necessarily think is offered to him in this Lakers offense, right? So there might be a number of things going on with Luka there, but it just feels like from the eye test, I'm not seeing as many like ridiculous passes where I'm watching it. I'm like, that was just straight up impossible. I'm not saying he's doing a bad job, right? But it just doesn't feel like this is peak Luka. But I don't know if that's a Luka thing or I don't know if that's the roster construction thing.
Exactly. I think it's that the fact that they had a perfect roster around him with the lob goblins for a vertical threat and then all those shooters on the outside to space, play, catch, and shoot and attack the closeout. So I do think it's a difference in roster what you're seeing this season when it comes to him. Yeah.
Who else were we just talking about here?
Well, there's a lot of players. You mentioned Shai. I mentioned Jaylen Brown, Austin Reeves, Steph Curry. We've talked about Tyrese Maxey. I will throw another one at you. You did not mention 3 players that I had written down. James Harden.
Yep.
Donovan Mitchell.
Yep.
And What did I say? 3 players?
You did say 3 players.
I wonder who the third one now is, because I have a bunch of other players written down. I was like, wait a second, I had 3 in mind for Cody: James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, and I will throw at you Kevin Durant. How about that? I'll throw Kevin Durant at you.
Oh, that's really interesting. So the thing about James Harden is I looked up a couple data points. He's running a lot of isolation this year. Like his bread and butter here is, I think it's probably like he did with his Rockets days at his peak. It probably starts with a screen. He probably gets a switch and he dances on them that way. But I think I saw that most of his offensive possessions were in isolation that way. So I don't know if that muddies the waters a little bit more. But yeah, Harden is definitely pretty high in this category for me. Mitchell kind of has the passing issues that we may have talked about. I wouldn't be surprised if he was pretty close to like a Maxey level in terms of, great shooter in his own right, extremely explosive, great footwork and strength and things like that. But passing wise, a little bit more on the rocky side. I don't remember who the third player was.
It's okay. It's really okay. The third player I really wanted to ask you about was Nikola Jokic. I don't think we've mentioned him because he doesn't run a ton of inverted pick and rolls, but when it comes to isolation or post up, he also doesn't run a ton of those either, but he's very efficient in both these buckets. So I'm just wondering how you're feeling about a player who is lower volume in these categories. Is he did we mention Jalen Brunson?
Well, I said him first. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I thought that might've been my third player from a second ago. I'm just wondering how you feel about a lower volume player.
So I think Jokic is interesting because if he was called upon, in my opinion, if it was like, hey, we need you to be in the post and just go beast mode and run an bunch of offense through that sort of isolation, he strikes me as someone that could do that. And I think we've seen it in stretches, especially in some playoff runs where the offense is getting mucky, they're shutting down passing a lot more, and he just crushes people in the paint. So I don't think it's cheating to point to him and say, yeah, I think that he could fit into this conversation.
Okay. We have not talked about LaMelo Ball.
We haven't talked about. Can I throw in one more player before we get to LaMelo?
Yes.
What are the numbers on Anthony Edwards?
Anthony Edwards, would you like isolation numbers from Anthony Edwards, or would you like pick and roll numbers from Anthony Edwards?
Do I have to pick one or two, or can I get like an Applebee's 2-for-1 entree special?
We'll give you the 2-for-1. We'll give you the 2-for-1.
Thank you.
Because when it comes to isolation efficiency among players with, like decent isolation volume, he's kind of middle of the road. But when it comes to the pick and roll numbers, which is maybe your instinct here, the pick and roll numbers are really good. He's 6th. There is a drop from that Jamal Murray group that we talked about at the beginning, but 106 offensive rating, which is the exact same as Luka Doncic and Peyton Pritchard, basically.
I think in terms of the passing, again, Mitchell, Maxey category, probably even like a little bit of a step below those guys in terms of a passer, but his shooting's been lights out. Like the tough pull-up 3-point shooting, I don't think he has quite the gravity. Like he definitely doesn't have the gravity Curry does, but his shot making, not to the level of Brown, but it's still been pretty spectacular in a lot of those instances. So I was wondering how that would translate to the numbers.
I don't want to do a whole sidebar on Anthony Edwards, but what do you make of him being sort of like historically one of the worst mid-range 2-point shooters ever by high volume, and then turning into this great pull-up isolation 3-point shooter by volume? It's very strange. It's almost like he shoots the 3 slightly better than he shoots from between like 10 and 23 feet. It's really weird.
It is really weird. He's one of these guys that it feels like he's going to shoot the 3 just as well if you're defending him or not defending him.
Yes.
Like he's just a classic tough shot maker in that respect, but I don't know if you're like, hey, be Ray Allen for us and just come off a bunch of pin downs and get some gravity that way. He doesn't strike me quite as much as is that kind of an offense player, but it's been quite a growth. Like it's unbelievable to see that he's just a 40% 3-point shooter now.
How do you feel about Darius Garland?
I mean, he would definitely be in this conference. Like he would have been in that first group had this been, let's say, last year. It's just I haven't seen it consistently enough this year to have thrown him in there.
Okay, so is the idea here to kind of summarize or corral this conversation and give it some more structure? Is the idea here that that group of players that you listed at the beginning, Cade, Shea, Jamal Murray, Luka Doncic, Jalen Brunson, maybe a few more, are those players for you comfortably ahead of where you would slot someone like LaMelo?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Is there another group of the players we've talked about below that, or are you starting to go like, oh, Austin Reeves versus LaMelo, or Steph Curry versus LaMelo?
Well, I mean, I think we can put Steph Curry in that first group, can't we?
I I personally would, yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I
Yes.
think there's probably another group there. We haven't said Trae Young yet either in this conversation. I don't know if that's a games played thing or what, but
Yeah, I think it's probably largely a games played thing. I mean, the other part of this conversation that I think is so tricky is the Shea, Jalen Brown, Kawhi Leonard
Mhm.
corollary of just like when you can really crank isolation. And you mentioned this with Jokic, and I think it applies a little to Durant, which is why I brought him up, although I don't know if technically he has the isolation numbers this season. I know last year he was first in isolation efficiency and he ran a decent number of isolations in Phoenix last year. But it's like, if you can crank isolation offense with those guys and then blend in some pick and roll, is that in the same in that same ballpark of like centralizing the offense through just pick and roll? And we've seen this with Shea, where like the offense with Shea on the court last year was otherworldly. And a lot of that was getting into these isolation sets with the floor spaced in a specific way. And I feel like the Celtics are doing a similar thing with Jalen Brown. And I just how do you bake that in when comparing it to a more quote unquote pure pick and roll player?
I think that's a really good question. But I think in terms of Durant, like we've talked about a ton with, in terms of like you can throw a couple guys at him, you throw a bunch of bodies at him, really, what do you want to say? Crowd the dribbling and the passing and stuff, and he can get flustered a little bit more than these guys. So I think in terms of strictly like pick and roll sorts of conversation, he's below these guys. I'd still have guys like Mitchell above him there. I'd have Trae Young above him there. I'd have I don't even know who else we talked about there, but maybe like honestly closer to the LaMelo Ball category in this, right? Where, you know, you have a lot of skills, but I think you're starting to talk about some significant flaws that are going to hold you back from these higher tiers of these guys.
I think I would have. Well, I think I'd have a decent number of guys over LaMelo Ball here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for
Right.
sure.
I think all the guys we've talked about, for the most part, I would have over LaMelo Ball here. I'm just trying to think: is there like a top? Is there a group at the top that really has? I think you could make an argument for Shea at number one.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that. Who else? Luka, historically, you could make an argument at number one, right? Jalen Brunson is kind of a monster in this offensive setup, running a ton of pick and rolls and getting into ISO and things like that. Are you with me on this? Would you go in a different direction? Do you think
Yeah.
there are others who have a case for number one?
So I think we can crown. I don't care. Is it like 5 guys you're crowning? Would you throw Curry and Cade in there as well and just say like, hey, these 6 guys we probably consider to be the best pick and roll operators in the league?
Cade is a little trickier. I'm not sure. I think Shea. I feel like Shea and Luka and Brunson kind of win this category for me. I would say, yeah. And then I would probably. I don't know if I can make a case for Cade number one, but Cade's got to be right there in the next. When you start listing names after that, as great as Jamal Murray's been, I mean, Cade. The thing about Cade that we have to get to later in the year is his defense is just so good, Cody. His defense is just ridiculous.
No, I'd love. This is the thing. I've loved watching the Pistons. Like we might just have to do a full treatment on them.
Cade played a game last night against the Celtics, which was one of the games of the year. It was like a game 5 or game 6 of a playoff series, and he was like 2 for 11, and he played a really good game. And there's nothing cooler to me than when a star player is 2 for 11 and plays a really, really, really good game.
I'll say that's Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say that is both why Cade is so good this year and also why just ripping off this particular category. I don't know if we're talking about quite the same offensive punch yet as the other couple players that I would probably nominate in my number one spot here.
So I think that's a nice little list of a few guys that we talked about here. In terms of the way, and I know we're approaching an hour at this point, but the way that you were thinking about attacking this kind of question, right? Like what were you aiming towards? Like would your list in the way that you were conceiving of what we were going to talk about have differed dramatically than the guys that we just talked about?
I think it would just be more Jokic.
Okay.
And I think Curry gets a little more interesting as well. because of all his gravity. His gravity has proven you don't need tremendous skill players necessarily. In fact, the biggest gravitational footprints he's ever had in his entire career weren't just from his prime. They were from when you said, we don't need Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant. Like literally, they're just like, we will become a layup machine by running Steph Curry off ball with all these other role players, as long as we have some modicum of a passer and a ball handler out there. And those are usually accessible on much weaker teams like this. So I think those would be the two guys that conceptually, if I change the framing, would probably move up. I mean, I also think in this conversation right now, Kawhi Leonard and Jaylen Brown are really interesting because of the isolation stuff. I mean, Jaylen Brown's offensive game, I've been trying to figure it out internally, just in my own head at night when I go to bed. What does it mean to go from a meh or like a solid mid-range score? He already had the ability to score in isolation in big one-on-one moments to just be like, I'm Michael Jordan. Just in that one element of the game, I'm just ridiculous. And you saw it in the game last night. I don't know what he finished with, but he was just dragging Boston to baskets, free throws, putting his head down, getting into the paint. And so there is a leveling up there that specifically really maps onto this thought experiment. So those are probably the big ones for me that are different. And I'll add one more shout out because I mentioned him earlier. I think Austin Reeves in this particular category is really, really good. I don't know if there's easily, 8 or 10 players you can mention, especially when you just look at it from the pick and roll / ISO perspective. This is where he really shines to me.
So is your perspective, what is it more? Just like who's going to be the best offensive players if you're surrounded by more role playery?
Yes, that's how I was thinking of it. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think Austin Reeves, you think Austin Reeves would thrive in that? Because the way I think of Austin, and maybe this is a bias in the way that I've seen him playing next to LeBron and Luka, but it feels like you'd thrive more in an offense that was maybe with some higher level players.
No, I think he's thrived quite a bit when those guys have been out of the lineup. And I think you see it for this exact reason. It's similar to the Shea and Jaylen Brown thing I'm talking about.
Yep.
Tilt the floor so you prioritize his ball screen / pick and roll game. And then if you get a matchup with isolation, the Peyton Pritchard, whatever, like spread the floor out so he can attack that. And we'll get our stats department on it in a second, but I'm pretty sure from memory, that's where he's actually had some like monster performances and kind of surprised with the offensive quality, which is a weird way of saying that if Austin Reeves had his own team, he would probably get more respect because he would put up all these crazy numbers. So anyway, yeah.
So I think the way that you're thinking about it there would maybe map onto how somebody would more traditionally think of the question of who is the best offensive player in the league. It's like you take a bunch of role players, who's going to raise them up a little bit more? Because I'm looking, I'm like, all right, that's going to be somebody like Jokic. It's going to be Shea. Based on how he's playing, it's probably going to be somebody like Kawhi. Like you said, Steph Curry and his gravity, Jaylen Brown and his shot making, things like that. So yeah, maybe the list looks a little bit different in terms of that. But I think that's a cool way to conceive it because as you've talked about quite a bit, a player's offensive impact changes even within the same team context that they have.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Even if you're playing next to a high-end teammate, you can also see what they're like when that high-end teammate is off the court. And that also feeds into their overall impact and evaluation for how the team performs.
Yeah. Our stats department is telling me that Austin Reeves last season, without Luka or LeBron on the court for 600 minutes, the Lakers had a +7 offensive rating.
Oof.
And he had a 54 offensive load. So 54% of the direct actions are flowing through him, 27 points per 75, lots of creation, takes 8 threes per 75 possessions at 39%. I think that's in a way maybe his sweet spot. So to me, all these players, if we're trying to contextualize where LaMelo Ball fits in this kind of category, I would take basically all of these players.
Yes.
And we haven't even mentioned someone like De'Aaron Fox, who, I think is a pretty good basketball player and particularly solid in these areas as well. So I don't know. I mean, do you get to 15 guys before you say, absolutely have LaMelo in that group or something like that? Is that where are you at to wrap this conversation?
Man, that's interesting. The Fox comparison is great because I think Fox is just so much steadier. And obviously, like most everyone's going to be steadier than LaMelo. on offense. It's just the highs of LaMelo can just be so ridiculously high, right? And I think that just has to do with what you're comfortable with. But maybe putting him kind of near Fox, even in my opinion and bias, I'd still probably want to roll with somebody like Fox offensively because I know what I'm going to be getting more consistently. The pull-up mid-range shooting, like the fact that, yeah, not a great developed passer, but he's not going to be going crazy and trying out some new stuff like that. So maybe around that area sounds right. Ben, you haven't brought up somebody for the role player thing, and I just need to read some numbers for you. We haven't talked about a player that when he's on the court, they have 124.6 offensive rating.
Whoa.
Their team's offense, if I'm reading this correctly, is about 16 and a half points per 100 possessions better when he's on the court versus off the court.
16 and a half points per 100 possessions better on offense?
If I'm looking at numbers correctly, I think that's right. I think it's right, Ben. It might be 17.
What is going on right now?
And we haven't talked about this player. Ben is Milwaukee Bucks' Giannis
Antetokounmpo. I wish you could see my computer right now, Cody. I have Giannis. That's what I was looking at. Yeah. Where
does he land in here for you?
The constraint. So this is what I'm saying. If you were to think about this the way I was coming at it, he's someone who I think has to be very, very high on this list.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing the constraint of pick and roll or isolation game only, I don't think he's quite as high. I still think he's higher than LaMelo.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And with the pick and roll aspect, maybe not so much, but as an isolation attacking relentlessness that way, I certainly think that he falls into that.
Are you counting transition in isolation?
Ooh, that's a great question.
So this is what I'm saying, where it's like there's all these little nooks and crannies around the edges to iron out, because then you got to bring in someone like Danny Avdia. And of course, Giannis thrives in that situation, and they have a lot of similarities in how they can get downhill and stuff like that.
Heck, you could talk about Jaime Jaquez at that point then as well, just in the way that he's able to, break defenses down off the bench for Miami. So
I'd rather have LaMelo
than Jaime.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm just not a LaMelo guy, Ben.
So okay, so you're not even entertaining like 20 names. Then you're going even deeper.
Maybe I don't want to put my name out there with a number. I just don't know. I think it's a lot more complicated. I just want to be out of the LaMelo business. Let's just say that's all the stock is done. The islands are sold. It's over. I just want to talk about other players.
To support us, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. It's how you can get access to our top tier, gets access to these extra videos that we're talking about. We also have a stats board that we use to research podcasts. And why did I say research like that? That came out like a computer glitch. Research podcasts and the videos that we make. Cody, we've gone long today, so we have to be very quick. Do you have any? I mean, we did it. We made it through the LaMelo conversation. Do you have any non-basketball talk to sort of cleanse our soul like a great Winston Churchill speech at the end of Dunkirk?
Speaking of movies, Ben, what do you like? Do you rewatch movies? And if you do, what makes a movie rewatchable in your mind?
I do rewatch movies. These days, I wish I had more time to both rewatch movies and get in the headspace of enjoying to rewatch movies. And I was thinking about this recently. Like, I used to rewatch movies more because I had more time.
Yep.
There are certain movies that have tremendous rewatchability to me. I think it's one of the most important concepts in how a lot of us relate to movies, certainly how I relate to movies, because some movies are great, but they're just not easy. They don't go down easy.
No, yeah.
You can't be like, let me throw on some Schindler's List every night or something like that. But people should probably see Schindler's List. It's probably an important movie for people to see. So I think the setting, the levity, some of the script writing, the actors, the characters, the life of the characters, these things often make a movie rewatchable for me. Do I like to be in that mood, in that space, in the ambiance that the film has created? And the richness of a movie, honestly, Cody, sometimes you can rewatch a movie and it's light. Sometimes you rewatch a movie and you start seeing more and more and more and more, and you realize, my God, the writer and the production team and the set design, everything, so much thought went into this film, and it's designed to challenge me in a way to continue to get more and more out of each viewing. The story itself was so rich that each time I see it, one of my favorite movies ever, Shawshank Redemption. And I remember there was a period where I'd rewatch it and I would get a new perspective every time. I'd be like, oh no, the movie's about red. I would like every time I saw it, there would be a different perspective. And I think that's great.
I really like what you hit on in terms of like the layered approach to what a movie has. Cause I think when people talk about rewatchable movies, and maybe this is just because, you grow up and, you just turn on TNT or whatever, AMC or something like that, back when people didn't have all these streaming platforms. And I think people just jumped on being like, oh, this movie is a high level action flick. Like, I'm going to watch Drive. Drive is super rewatchable because the bus go really fast and things like that. No, nothing against Drive. It's not Drive.
Wait,
Speed.
You mean Speed?
Speed.
Like, there's no bus in Drive.
Speed, Drive, whatever else.
But Rush is extremely rewatchable. Keep going.
So a movie that has a lot of action is going to be good if like the pace is keeping you interested. But if it's a really surface level kind of pace, where it's just like, all right, I'm through the adrenaline of the first time. I kind of know what's going to happen. I'm not super interested. I think that takes away a lot of it. Like I also don't rewatch as much as I used to now. But the other day I had some time. I threw on One Battle After Another again. Let me tell you, it rips just as much the second time around because it has the pace, but also there's so much going on that when you finish a movie like that, you're like, I don't think I wrapped my arms around everything there is to it. It's like reading a Kurt Vonnegut novel where you read it and you're like, man, I know I'm missing so many things. And I think to me, that's the biggest part of what makes a movie rewatchable is like all of those multi-layers to it. Jordan Peele's Nope is another example of that, where I watched it the first time and I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. But the second time I'm like, this is nearing a masterpiece. Like there's just a lot more going on than I thought was going on.
And this is why I think this component of being rewatchable is something that so many people consciously or subconsciously really index on when they think about classic movies or favorite movies. They want to have a relationship with the movie. They want to be in the state of experiencing the movie, but also you start watching that thing again and you start noticing your brain starts clicking. You're like, what? I remember I watched 2001 A Space Odyssey when I was like 17, and there were things about the movie I loved, but I was like, man, this is a slow, boring movie. And then I've rewatched it a couple times since. The last time I rewatched it like a year or two ago, I was like jumping up and down in front of my TV with the ape scene at the beginning. Way more and just like you notice all these things because you see it from a different perspective. I think this also contributes to what we think of as classics. Like Chinatown in film circles is a classic, like quote unquote perfect script. And you start rewatching the movie and you're like, oh my God, like every line of dialogue and like everything and every shot connects back to something else later in the movie. That's ridiculous. So yeah, we could wax poetic about this all day, but
I was going to say maybe at a certain point we'll just have to branch off and make ourselves let's see what happens with the movie podcast.
We've made enough movie references today that if anyone hasn't seen these, they have their work cut out. They can watch it and then they can send us, that movie was terrible. What are you talking about? Thanks for listening. Yeah, go ahead. What are you going to say?
I was just about to say, like recently, I'm trying to incorporate more film analysis a little bit more in the classroom. And the one that we just went through is the Greta Gerwig Little Women. And you want to talk about a tight script and how the script and the way that that's set up in the nonlinear, storytelling contributes to the tension and things like that. It's also just one of these brilliant screenplays that you see it, and it just requires a couple of viewings to fully appreciate how good it is.
Thanks for listening all the way through on this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and of course that you're having a great day.